Thank you everybody for coming today. We are continuing our series in 1 Corinthians. And today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, a lot of people will use the last few chapters that we've studied, and including chapter 10 and 11, where Paul is discussing behavior. Now, Paul discusses behavior almost all the way through 1 Corinthians because that's what the letter is about. People from the church in Corinth came to him and said, these are behaviors that are going on in our church. You know what I mean? And we need to get some guidance on this because all this stuff is going on and we're not exactly sure how to handle it. Or because we were saved by grace, you know what I mean, and we have this liberty, should we even say anything at all? Should we do anything about this? What should we do, right? So in chapter 10, and a lot of preachers will use this to show people that if you don't act right after you're saved, you might lose your salvation, okay? It says, it talks about in chapter 9, that if you don't do what you should be doing, you know what I mean, that you could be disqualified. And it talks about people in chapter 10 being disqualified, right? But what we have to understand is, this is not talking about disqualification from salvation, okay? This is talking about losing reward, okay? So that's what this is all about. It's about losing reward when it comes to us. Now, when they talked about it in the Old Testament, it was you could lose your salvation, right? You could lose it. But under grace, once you have put your trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ, that He died for your sins according to the Scriptures, that He was buried, and that He rose again the third day according to the Scriptures, once you put your trust in that, you are saved that moment, okay? Okay, And what we need to understand is it's not enough to believe that happened, okay? All right, actually, that's part of history, okay? None of that has ever been disputed, except for the resurrection has been disputed, right? But there's no evidence to show that the resurrection didn't happen either, okay? Just people disputed it because they didn't believe in the resurrection from the dead, okay? All right, Obi. The reason I said that is he says, I've been watching some of your sermons and you say okay a lot. So I'm trying to, I keep hearing myself say it. But at least I quit saying all right. Anyway, but this chapter talks as if you're not acting right, you could lose something, right? But also, what did I read? And I read it right out of chapter 10. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Okay? So all things are lawful for us. Okay? But not all things are things that we should do. Right? Because they might send us in the wrong direction, and even worse, they might be an example to somebody else. All right, so we don't want to be a bad example. Now, in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, what we need to understand is it sounds general, but really he is attacking a specific subject, a specific thing that was going on in the church. Okay, so this is really, although it sounds general when you read it, it's very specific. Okay, the specific thing that was going on is the Corinthians. You know how the Corinthians are. They are like, if sin abounds, grace abounds much more. You know, that was their call letters. That was their theme. The more bad things they did, the more grace they received, is how they felt about it. You know, So they would go around and do bad things just so they could tell people, hey, I can do this and still be saved. Well, that's not what Paul wanted, right? Paul didn't want them to do that. Paul wanted them to act saved, so people could tell by their actions that they were saved, okay? And what these people were doing in chapter 10 is, we have to understand the culture of the day. They were participating, not only were they going to church, and doing all the Christian things and being Christians and all that stuff, and they believed in the gospel, right? They believed in God. They believed in the gospel that Paul preached. But what they would do is, for entertainment, they would go and participate in temple worship. Temples of false gods, false god worship. They would go to these temples and participate in this false worship. Why? Not because they believed in the other God. They didn't believe in the other God. They believed in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But it was fun. Okay? It was a lot of fun. First, in these temple worship, especially in Corinth they did this, you would go into the temple, you would pay your temple tax, you would go into the temple, and while you were in there, you might have to go through some kind of a ritual, and praise the God and everything. Now, these people didn't believe in that God. This was just something that they would go through just to be a part of the temple worship, right? So they would go in, they'd pay their money, because you'd have to pay money to go into the temple, right? Once you got in there, it was all inclusive. You've seen those commercials where they have those beach resorts, and everything's included, you know what I mean? I remember Robbie and I used to go to a place when we were younger, not long after we got married. They had a place when we lived in Jackson. And you could go out there, right? And the man would pay $5, women got in free. You could drink beer all night for free. And they would either have a band or they'd play music and you could dance and everybody had a real good time, right? I'd pay my $5, we'd go in, we'd have a wonderful time, you know what I mean? Never did anything too bad. I did get so bad I hugged a tree one night, but that's another story. But you see what I mean? It was all inclusive. You go in, you pay your $5, and you go in and you enjoy the night. All right, so they go through their little ceremonies and everything that they had to do. And while they were doing that, at the same time, they were either drinking wine. Sometimes they would drink as much wine as they could, right? Or sometimes they would even take certain drugs, right? That would get them into this heightened state. Most of us have been to this heightened state, all right? Have either drank enough or done enough drugs to be in a heightened state. I'm not saying that any of y'all do that now. I'm just saying it's happened to most of us, right? And then once they got to this point, then they would take a temple prostitute and they would sleep with the prostitute. And the idea was that when and by the time you were done having sex with this prostitute, you were kind of like in an euphoric state. You know what I mean? Everything was well in the world. You were feeling really, really good. You know what I mean? And they felt like that would bring you closer, that state of mind would open up a portal to the God that you were worshiping. That it was easier to understand the God and to hear from that God if you were in that state. Euphoric, that's the word I was looking for. Euphoric state, right? So that's what this was all about. Now, some of the people who went to these temples, I would say probably at least half of them, really believed in that God, right? And were really trying to get closer to that God. But the other half of the people were going because it was entertaining. It was a good time. You have to understand, back in these days, this was a big business. You know? They were taking that money in like crazy because people were doing this every day, you know what I mean? It's not much different than Las Vegas, right? You go into a casino, and as long as you're gambling, they'll bring you drinks, right? And then prostitution is legal in Nevada, so when you got done with all that, you could go get a prostitute, right? How much different is it? It's not much different at all, is it? These people, and see what these Christians were doing is they believed in Jesus Christ. They believed in the gospel, right? They believed they were saved by grace through faith, that not of themselves, it's a gift of God. They believed in their liberty, right? That once they were saved, they were always saved. That the blood of Jesus Christ paid for all their sin, all of it, right? Past, present, and future, right? And so they were going to church, and they were worshiping God, but to entertain themselves, they were going to these temples and participating in this false worship for entertainment more than they were, because they didn't believe in the gods. And it's very clear in chapter 10 here, he kind of makes that clear that it's not okay to be a part of this if you're a Christian. And that's what Paul's talking about here. I watched a documentary last night, and it was about the oracles of the dead. All right, has anybody heard of the oracles of the dead? All right, we don't do that anymore. But during this time, there was a lot of oracles of the dead thing going on. What they would do is they found places. Like there was this one specific place that was in southern Italy, and if you go down into these caves, and in these areas that they had dug out of the caves, right? And you would go down and go down and go down, and then once you got down to a certain point, there was a river down there called the River Rice, I think is what it was called, or something like that. And you had to cross that river because the spirits of the dead and the spirits of the gods were on the other side of that river. You had to cross that river to get into their presence. And then once you would cross that river, there'd be a room there, and you'd go into that room. Now, you already paid your money before you ever started. Went in, right? It was the same thing as the temple tax, you know what I mean? They'd pay them a bunch of money, and they would go into this place, and there would be a woman down there, and she would just be flailing around, looking like she was out of her mind because, they said it's because she's speaking with the gods and she's speaking with the dead, you know what I mean? They have control over her. And what would happen is they would give her drugs to make her act like that, okay? And then you would go in and you would ask questions of the oracle. Like if you were a king or something like that, you would go to the oracle and say, should I go to war with this country or should I not? You know what I mean? Important questions they would go and ask these people. Now it was mostly done by wealthy people because they had the means to do it. All right, and their questions were more important, of course. Kings, rulers. As a matter of fact, if you were a king, right, and you went to your people and said, we are going to go to war with these other people, they wouldn't even listen to you until you told them that you went to the oracle and asked the oracle about it. All right? And then if the oracle said it was the right thing to do, then the people would go along with it because the oracle said it's the right thing to do. People really believed in this, okay? And what they would do is the person would come in and he'd ask the oracle a question, right? And the oracle would just keep going, she would just, and she would just gibberish. Well, they'd have a holy man over there on the side writing down what she said, right? And he didn't understand what she said any more than you and I would, because it was just gibberish. Sorry about that. So it was just gibberish. But he was sitting there writing down. So whatever they asked, he'd say, well, the oracle said this. He could have wrote down anything he wanted to. You know what I mean? He could have wrote anything down. And then he would say, it's kind of like people today when they'll speak in tongues and then they have somebody interpret it. The person interpreting it can say anything they want. Who knows if they're, you know what I mean? So, and then they would get the answer to their question, and then they would leave and go back and say, okay, I've been to the oracle, and the oracle said we should do this. So the oracles, you know, in those days, you would not make any major decision without going to see the oracle first. Another thing that was big business. The temples, big business, brought lots of people in. You know, half of them just for entertainment, maybe more than half. The oracles were the same thing. Big business. These people were making money on hand over fist doing this, right? What Paul wants people to know in chapter 10 is, even if you don't believe in that stuff, not only you need to not participate in that stuff. Okay? Well, let's read some of it. Let's read some in chapter 10. So now that you understand what we're talking about here. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. Now, do we know who he's talking about here?
Yes.
He's talking about the Jews, right? All of us who have been studying the Old Testament for the last 6 or 7 years, we know what he's talking about here. It's when they passed through the Red Sea, right? So, they passed through the sea. So he's talking about the Jews who were coming out of Egypt, right? And were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat that same spiritual meat, right? The spiritual food. He's talking about the manna that was sent down from God, okay? And did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. So he's talking about the Jews who have come out of Egypt, right? And they all passed through the sea, right? They all put their trust in Moses. That's what it means by baptized unto Moses. They were putting their trust in Moses, okay? And they all ate the manna, right? They all drank from the water that came from that rock. So they were all the same, weren't they? They were believers. They were all part of God's people, right? These were God's special people, right? That's why he brought them out of Egypt. So that's who, and he's using these people as an example. You know, it's funny, I read this, and my first pastor believed, you know, if y'all remember the stories about them being in the desert, one of the very first things that happened was they ran out of water. Okay? Once they came out of Egypt and they passed through the Red Sea, within just a few days, they were in a place where there wasn't any water. So they were murmuring and complaining about the fact that Moses had brought them into the desert to die because there's no water for everybody to drink. And Moses went to God, and God said, I want you to go down, and there's a particular rock, and I want you to hit that rock. And when you hit that rock, water's going to come out, and it's going to be enough for everybody to drink. So he did, and everybody drank, right? And then toward the end of their 40 years in the desert, it happened again. They got into a place where there wasn't any water, and they were murmuring, complaining that Moses had brought them into the desert to die because there wasn't any water there. And so Moses went to God, and God said, I want you to do the same thing to the rock. And the rock brought forth water. Actually, God told Moses not to hit the rock. He didn't tell him to hit the rock on the second time. He told him to speak to the rock, and the water would come out. Okay? Now, Moses didn't do that. Moses was mad about the people complaining and murmuring, and he hit the rock. Right? Water did come out anyway, but then Moses was disqualified from going into the promised land. Okay? And what he's getting at here is these same people who went through the Red Sea, who put their trust in Moses, who ate the manna, who drank water from that rock, right? These same people became disqualified because of their actions, because of the things that they did, okay? And every one of them, except for 2 people, Joshua and Caleb, died in the desert before they went into the promised land, okay? Now, I was going to say, just a second ago, my first pastor, he used to tell me that, you see, that rock followed them around. That rock followed them everywhere they went. And then every time they needed water, there was the rock. Well, that's not true at all, okay? That's not what he's saying here when he says, let's see if I can think.
The spiritual rock that followed them.
Yeah, the spiritual rock that followed them. Christ was always with them, okay? And that's what he's talking about. Christ was always with them, okay? He is the rock, isn't he?
Yes.
Okay? But Christ, there wasn't a rock that followed them wherever they went. Okay? There was a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of dust by day, you know what I mean? Or a pillar of cloud by day. That was God right there being with them. That didn't follow them, it actually led them. Okay? So God was always with them, is all he's trying to say here about the rock following them. So just so you understand that, the rock did not follow them. Okay? What does it say in verse 5? But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples. So Paul is saying, this is an example to you. To the intent, we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. You know what was the first thing they did after they got the law? Was build a golden calf and start calling it their God and start worshiping it. Right? As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. That's exactly what it talks about when Moses was up on the mountain and they had made that false god. That's exactly what they did. They ate and drank, and then they got up and they just had a good time. It goes on to say, verse 8, neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Now, in the Old Testament, I think it actually says 24,000. So it's just a little bit off, but still it's the same thing he's talking about, right? Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. At one point, during their trek, they were murmuring and complaining, and God sent serpents into the camp. Okay? And they would bite people, and people would die from these serpent bites. And they went to God, and God said, okay, put a snake on an image of a snake, put it on the end of a pole, rise it up, and when people look on that pole and say, I trust in that pole to keep me safe from the snakes, then even if they got bit, they didn't die, right? Or the snakes wouldn't bite them, right? Because they put their trust in something, right? So that actually happened. He sent snakes into the camp and killed them, and a lot of people died that way. Verse 10, neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. That happened as well. What he's talking about here is they complained against Aaron and Moses. All right? They had turned against God's assigned leaders. Okay? And because of that, many of them died. Now, verse 11, now all these things happened unto them for ensamples or examples, and they are written for our admonition. In other words, you need to look at this and say, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest that he fall. Now this is the part where he's talking about just because you're a Christian and you're saved by grace doesn't mean that bad behavior is a good idea. Okay? I know you're saved. I know you trust in the finished work of Jesus Christ. But just because you're saved doesn't mean these things are okay. It doesn't mean you'll lose your salvation, but it doesn't mean it's okay either. Okay? Verse 25. Oh, no, that's not one. And this is a very important verse, and you hear this verse preached a lot. It says, there hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. All right? How many people have heard that verse before? That there is no temptation that you are not able to bear. God always gives you a way out. Okay? It's a very famous verse. We've all heard it, haven't we? And it's true. Okay? We need to understand that if there is a temptation in front of you, because you are a saved, because you're a Christian, because you're saved, because you have the Holy Spirit living inside of you, God will always give you a way out of that temptation. Okay? A lot of times it's just saying no. I think we all know how to say that, don't we? That's one of the first things we learn when we have children in it. Or get a dog. No, 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 no. We all know how to say no. Right? God gives us the ability to say no to things that before we couldn't say no to. Okay? We don't have to be big sinners. Right? We have the ability to not sin. Well, maybe not completely, because we have this sin living inside of us. Nobody's ever been able to accomplish not sinning except for Jesus. Right? But we have the ability to overcome temptation. That's what Paul is telling us here. Okay? And it's because we have the Holy Spirit living inside of us. It says, wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Okay? This idolatry that I'm talking about is what we were talking about earlier. Going to the temple, to this place of false worship, so that they could be entertained. He says to them, flee idolatry. Don't go anywhere around it. Don't get close to it. Don't hang out with people who do it. Don't go to the temple and act like you're doing it just for fun. Flee from it. Get away from it. He says, I speak as to wise men. Judge ye what I say. In other words, this is what you should be doing. Fleeing idolatry. Not going up to it and touching it, you know what I mean? And saying, well, I'm still saved anyway. And then, you know, I don't think any of us believe that that's a good idea, do we? I don't believe any of us believes that it's okay to sin. The Corinthians did, as a general rule. They thought it was okay to sin. They thought it was okay to do anything they wanted to. Because the more they sinned, they felt the more grace would abound in their lives. The more they sinned, they could say, see, I do all this stuff, and I'm saved, so you can get saved too. I remember once, when I first got saved, I didn't understand this concept. When I first got, and what I told him was true. I told my brother, because I was trying to get to him to help him get saved. I went to my brother and I said, look, a lot of people believe that you have to change to get saved. You have to change your behavior. You have to change the way you think. You have to change what you do to be saved. And I said, you don't have to change anything to be saved. You can still live the life you're living right now and just trust in Jesus Christ, you know, and His finished work, and you'll be saved. He still hadn't gotten saved, but that's true. But at the same time, we don't want people who get saved to behave like people who aren't saved. Okay? And that's what this whole chapter's about. If you're saved, act like it. Do what saved people do, and don't be a part of this idol worship and any other kind of sin that comes along. It says, verse 16, the cup of blessing which we bless is not the communion. Is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, being many, are one bread and one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread. Behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices, partakers of the altar? What say I then? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, and not to God. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils. What he's saying here is, even if you don't believe in this false god, and you're just going in there for entertainment, okay? You are associating yourself with, you are having a relationship with a false god. And these false gods that they were talking about, Paul says that they are demons. That's who these false gods are. They're demons. And these people are sacrificing and doing all this ritual stuff for these demons, just as Christians do the same thing, or the people in the Old Testament, when they did their sacrifices and everything, all the sacrifices that are part of the law, when they did that, they were sacrificing to God, weren't they? But the Gentiles were sacrificing to devils. Right? And he's saying you should not have any kind of relationship with a devil. Right? Because you have a relationship with Christ. You shouldn't want to have a relationship with the devil and a relationship with Christ at the same time. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that. Okay? Nobody ever went into a strip club and started singing, Jesus loves me. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't, because that's not what you're not thinking about God when you're in a place like that, are you? If you were in this temple and you were sacrificing to that devil, even though you didn't really want to sacrifice, but see, the meal, they would have meals too, just like the Lord's Supper, just like the communion, right? And he says here, now when we take in that bread, it becomes the body of Christ, doesn't it? And when we take in that wine, it becomes the blood of Christ, right? I mean, to us, it is, spiritually, right? He says, and when you do this in the house of a false god, or the house of a devil, it becomes part of you, right? And so you cannot walk both walks. I've talked about this many times before. There are two roads, okay? You can walk in the way of God, and when you do, all the blessings of God are on that road, all right? They're right on that road, and you just walk right into them. Or you can walk on this road over here. God's road is over here. You can walk on this road. You can walk as far as you want, and you're never going to walk into God's blessings, right? But what these people were doing is they were walking between the roads. If things look good over here on this road, like temple worship, they'd walk on this road one night. The next night, they'd walk on this road. They'd go in here, they'd go to the church. This night, they'd go to the temple, worship the idol. You know what I mean? For entertainment. The next night, they'd be over here doing this. So they couldn't be doing, you can't do two things at one time. And if you're associating with devils, you can't associate with God at the same time. Okay? And that's what he's trying to get across here. You cannot do both at the same time. All right? It says here in verse 22, do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than He? Now see, this is what I was talking about with them believing that the more they sin, the more grace abounded to them. All right? So they could tempt Jesus to be even better to them because they were associating with devils. Right? But that's not how it works, is it? But here in verse 23, this is the most important verse in this chapter. It says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. Or in other words, helpful. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. Okay? Because the rest of the chapter is about being an example to other people. And that's what edifying is, right? It's building up other people. So all things are lawful. Right? It's not going to ruin your salvation. But what it does do is it takes away reward. That's the disqualification. You aren't disqualified from being saved. You're disqualified from the reward that is waiting for you in heaven if you're walking this road, God's road, all the time. Okay? Because on this road, God puts things in your way where if you are loving and do the right thing, you are blessed for it, not on this earth, but it is part of your reward. And if you walk on this road constantly, God's road, right? At the end of that road, if you've accomplished everything that God has put in front of you, right? Then you have this reward already set up for you in heaven. Okay? There's a reward up there, right? And if you accomplish everything that God's put in front of you, you get that entire reward. Okay? But if you're over here and you're walking on this road, or even in the middle of the two roads, what happens is that reward that's already set up for you diminishes. The more you walk on this road, the more that reward diminishes. Okay? Has nothing to do with your salvation. Right? You are still the body of Christ. You are still in Christ. Right? You are still saved. There's nothing that anybody can do to change that. Not even you. But that reward diminishes every time you walk on this road instead of that one. And that's what he's talking about here. Now he's going to talk about how we need to be an example to other people. He said, verse 24 says, let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth. Now this has been taught from the beginning. God has always taught this very same thing. Right? Put the needs of others before yourself. That's all he's saying. Put the needs of others before yourself. Sacrifice yourself for other people. And it's exactly what Christ did, wasn't it? He sacrificed himself for other people. And that's all God really wants from us. That's where it all starts. There are a lot of details that we can talk about. Right? If you do this, that's good. If you do this, that's good. If you do this, that's good. Right? But it all starts with putting the needs of others above yourself. Right? And if you are walking on this road right here, you are not putting the needs of others above yourself. This road is about your needs. This road is about your pleasure. This road is about you. Okay? But this road is about putting the needs of others before yourself. Okay? That's the road he wants you to be on. But these people weren't doing that, were they? They were being bad examples to other people. He goes on and he talks. He says, verse 27, if any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, and ye be disposed to go whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. He's talking about food offered to idols. Okay? Paul says if you go to somebody's house, somebody asks you to come to their house to eat, right? And you go there to eat. If you ask them if that's been offered to an idol, and they say yes, you don't eat it. To be an example, not that it hurts you, but to be an example to someone else who might be at that dinner. But if you go to that feast, what Paul is saying is don't even ask. If they don't tell you that it's offered to idols, go right ahead and eat it. Right? That's not a bad example. Let's go on. He says, but if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake that he showed it, and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof. See, not eating food offered to idols was one of the ordinances that went along with being a Christian in this time. Right? Now, later on, all these ordinances disappeared. Okay? But when Paul was preaching and when he was on his missionary journeys, he was saving them through the gospel of grace. He was saving them through the gospel of the gospel he talks about in 1 Corinthians 15, right? But there were ordinances that they were expected to keep. And one of them was not eating food offered to idols. Okay? So, you weren't to do that. Right? Now, that's not really a problem for us today, because I don't know of anybody that offers, well, I don't know anybody, I'm sure it happens, to offer animal sacrifices to some god or to the devil or somebody like that, and then cook it up and ask you to dinner. Right? It doesn't happen a lot these days. I'm sure it does happen, but it doesn't happen a lot. All right? So we don't have, that's not a big problem for us, but for them, it was a big problem. Okay? It was a big problem. It was something that was happening every day. Verse 29, conscience, I say, not thine own, but of the other. For why is my liberty judged of another man's conscience? What he's saying here is, it's okay to do it. Don't you dare judge me for doing it. All right? Because you don't have the right to judge me. So if I eat that, and if I eat that meat that's been sacrificed to idols, you don't have the right to judge me. But the problem is the guy next to you is saying, you know, this is Paul. He's a Christian. And Christians aren't supposed to eat food offered to idols. So what it does is, it gives that person next to him the wrong idea. That's okay. Right? It is okay. But what happens is that kind of thing causes people not to believe in God. Right? Not to want to listen to him when he talks to them about God. It's kind of like every preacher on television asks for money. Right? Nothing wrong with that. They want to promote their ministry. Okay? If they're doing it for the right reason, or they're using that money to help people, or they want to enhance their ministry so they can reach out to more people, I get that. Sometimes they have really good intentions for asking for that money, right? But then there are people, like Edie's brother, who says, all preachers just want money. So he won't have anything to do with Christianity. He won't have anything to do with God. He won't have anything to do with any of this, because he believes all preachers are out for money. You see what I'm saying? And that's what Paul is saying here. You know, people will get turned off of Christianity if you're acting like someone that's not a Christian. I mean, how many times have people said, I don't go to church because they're all a bunch of hypocrites? That's what this is talking about. This is talking about hypocrites. Going to church on Sunday, singing the songs, listening to the sermons, praising God. Got your bumper sticker on the back that says, beep if you love Jesus. and they follow you right to the bar. Right?
Mm.
Or they follow you, or they see you pull into your girlfriend's house when you're married, when you both of you are married. Or, you know, they see you with another woman or something like that, or another man when you're married. And they think, well, they're just a bunch of hypocrites. You know, that's what this is talking about. It's all lawful, but it's not edifying. All right? Nobody has the right to judge you for doing that. All right? God is your judge, and He will judge you for it. Right? And that reward just will diminish and diminish and diminish. But the worst part is you're a bad example to the other people. What if a young Christian sees you doing these things? Makes them believe, well, the preacher does it. I guess it's okay for me to do it. You know? Or the deacon does it. I guess it's okay for me to do it. Right? What if it's kind of like, when I was growing up, I had a Sunday school teacher. His name was Claudia Gaskins. Fine man. I'm telling you, he was a fine man. Loved the man to death. Right? He used to hate me because I asked so many questions. And eventually he would just shut me down and say, okay, no more questions today. You know, because he didn't know. He was just reading from the little Baptist book, you know, Sunday school Baptist book that they had. He was my Sunday school teacher for years because I went through one class and he was the Sunday school teacher of it, and then I got transferred to the older class. Well, the same year I got transferred to the older class, he became the teacher of the older class. You know what I mean? So he was my Sunday school teacher for years. And I had a lot of respect for him. And I learned a lot of stuff from him. And I was at the store one day. This is false. It's a small town, right? There is the store. Okay? There is the post office, the store, the railroad tracks. You know what I mean? There's only one of everything. So I was because I was doing my paper route, right? And I had finished about half my route, and I was went in the store to get me a soft drink, and I was standing outside drinking soft drink. Well, Mr. Gaskins was standing out there too, and he was talking to this other guy, right? Guy I'd never seen before, never met him, had no idea who he was. And they were standing there both cussing like sailors. I'm 10, 11 years old. What in the heck am I supposed to think about this? As you can see, I still remember it today. I still remember that today. Claudia Gaskins, to me, was a good Christian man. And then I walk up and I hear that. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know what to think. You know? And see, the same thing happens to other people when they are around us. What are you doing when you're around other people? Are you acting like a Christian? Or are you acting like you're associating with devils? We have to think about that. That's why we're here, is to bring people to the Lord, not run them away from Him because they think we're hypocrites, right? Or they think we're all out for money, or they think that we just want control over their lives, which is true of a lot of churches. They just want control over your life so that you will continue to come to church and tithe every week and support the church so that they can get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the pastor can get paid more and more and more. Right? This happens all the time. I'm not saying all churches are like that. Most of these people have great intentions, don't get me wrong. But people they see one example of it, and they think all churches are like that. They think all preachers are like that. They think all Christians are hypocrites because they see one example of it. And all Paul is telling us is, don't be that bad example. Don't be that guy. There's this radio station that I listen to, it's a sports station, and they have a segment every week for about an hour, and the segment is, don't be that guy. And people will call in and say, don't be that guy that does so-and-so. Like, don't be that guy that drives 35 miles an hour in the left lane. You know what I mean? Don't be that guy. You know? Or don't be that guy that wears that wears a Redskins hat and a Titans jersey and shows up at the Titans game. Don't be that guy. You understand what I'm saying? Don't be that guy that weaves all over the road. You understand what I'm saying? Don't be that guy. And that's all Paul is saying. Don't be that guy. Right? Verse 30. For if by grace be a partaker, why am I evil spoken of? For that for which I give thanks. In other words, he's still talking about eating food that's offered to idols. Whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God. In other words, whatever you're doing, stay on this road. All right? Stay on the right road. Do it all for the glory of God. Give none offense, neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God. Give no offense, okay? Even as I please all men in all things, seeking not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. Now, in the former chapter, the chapter we did before this, Paul talks about to Jews, I act like a Jew. To Gentiles, I act like a Gentile. In front of Christians, I act like a Christian. So that I can win those people to the Lord. Okay? Now, later on in Paul's epistles, all that is thrown out. Okay? Being all things to all people gets thrown out. Alright? You are not to be all things to all people. You are to be a new creation. Alright? A new creature. Alright? But at this time, right? He's saying, be all things to all people, so that in some way you might bring them to the faith, right? Yeah, and that's, even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, right? He's doing it not for himself. He is sacrificing himself to bring people to God, okay? Do it as a sacrifice. Remember, Peter, there's a story about where Peter went to one of the churches that he started, and when Peter got there, he was acting and doing the same things that the people in the church were doing. They were all Gentiles, right? They weren't Jews. So Peter was just acting like them. You know what I mean? He would eat stuff that was offered to idols. He would do whatever it was they were doing. He was being all things to them. And then when the Jews would come in, a bunch of Jews came into that town and started coming to that church. These were people who were part of the little flock, okay? They traveled to this city because they wanted to see what was going on and everything like that. So they traveled to the city, and when they got there, Peter stopped acting like a Christian and started acting like a Jew again. Paul got all over him about it. Okay? So what are you doing? You were eating with the Gentiles, last week. And now that the Jews are here, you won't even eat with the Gentiles anymore. What's going on with you? So there's a point where being all things to all people is not a good idea. You know what I mean? There's a stopping point, right? Being all things to all people does not mean that you go to a strip club because a friend of yours is going, so that you might win into Christ. I don't think so.
No.
You know? But if your religion tells you not to eat fish on Friday, and a friend of yours calls you and asks you over for dinner on Friday and puts fish in front of you, you should eat the fish and thank God for it. All right? That's the thing. You thank God for it in front of Him. Right? Thank God for Him in front of Him. That way you're glorifying God. You see what I mean? Think about it. How many of us, when we go to a restaurant, say the blessing before we eat? A lot of us do. I always do as well. And I do it out loud so that people can hear me. Right? But if you're in a bar somewhere, or someplace even worse than that, and you do it, they're going to mock you. That's not going to bring them closer to God. But if you're in just a regular restaurant and you do it, then people will look at that and say, glory to God.
Yes.
You know? Or he's a good Christian man. Look, you know, he even prays even at restaurants. You know? Because we all know Christians who don't do that, right?
Right.
As a matter of fact, until I became a Christian, I never met a Christian who did it. I mean, I grew up in a Baptist church, and I never saw one of them say the blessing in a restaurant. You know? God just wants us to be a good example to other people. If we're not here, if we are not bringing people to God, there is no reason for us to be here. Okay? He's just saying, walk the right road, do the right thing. So people will see your example, right? And it'll bring them closer to God. And then you might even get the chance to teach them the gospel, to tell them the gospel, to bring them into salvation that Christ has offered to them. But you're not going to be doing it. You're not ever going to bring anybody to God by being a bad example. Okay? That's my message.